Welcome back, everybody. Today we are going to be taking a look at a Flaridos deck from the 2007 format. The main idea of a Flaridos deck is that you are going to be relying on Ariados as a single prize attacker, to essentially, you can either Spider Trap, bring up something on the bench, or the active, put him asleep, poisoned, and then the reactive poison, it does 10 damage plus 30 damage, more damage for each special condition on the defending Pokemon. Now, as a single prize attacker, Ariados is incredibly disruptive. It's very good against any sort of stage 2 deck that requires set up Pokemon on the bench with high retreat costs. But even against just very fast speed decks like Lucario, having that 50-50 shot at them staying asleep can be absolutely huge. Now, reactive poison is where a lot of the damage comes in. Ideally, you spider trap something active, they stay asleep and poison between turns. Coming back into your turn, you're able to react to poison for 70, plus the 2 damage counters from poison in between both turns is going to be 90. Now, there's only a 25% chance that the Pokemon stays asleep just based on sleep flips, and even less of a chance when you start factoring in things like Warp Point Switch and Mr. Briny's Compassion, or just flat evolving them. So, to increase the number of special conditions we have in the deck, we are playing 3 copies of Flareon EX. Now, this is going to make your opponent's active Pokemon burned and confused. So, you have some different math that you can do here, and we do some different things with things like Full Flame, but essentially, if you just Flareon, they're active, and then you reactive poison, you're going to hit for a guaranteed 70 damage, and then you got a 50-50 shot at getting the burn. So there's a 50-50 shot at hitting for 90 damage. Now, if you spider trap something active and they're still, say, poisoned, that's going to add another 30, and then all of a sudden you're up to 120 damage with the Flareon. And for a single prize attacker, Ariados is hitting for some major damage. Now, this list is based incredibly heavily on John Silvestros' third place Nationals list from 2007. Now, most people know Steven Silvestro, the 2009 world champion, but John Silvestro, his father, was actually the first of the two to find success at a large-scale event. Now, let's go ahead and just jump right on into the deck here, and I'll cover my list and then talk about a few of the changes between mine and John's. Of course, we go for EVs. I don't make them disappear here. 4 EVs, Call for Family, outstanding opener. You really do prefer to open with a Spinnerack, but if you do get the EV start, it's not the end of the world. 3 Flareons. Now, a couple of things to note here. Mainly, we play it for that Evolutionary Flame body, Pokepower, but Flame Screen and Heat Tackle can both be solid attacks, especially if we're softening things up with Ariados in the first place. So, while it's not a go-to strategy to attack with Flareon, definitely remember it's one of the options you have with the deck. 1 Jolteon EX. You'll find yourself in a lot of situations being 10 off. And then, of course, Second Bite can be really good damage as well. 1 Umbreon. Now, in my testing, I actually haven't found Umbreon to be that strong, but in the right meta, I know it's incredibly strong if you're playing against a lot of Meta Knight decks or decks like Banette EX. The Umbreon can be incredibly strong, and I do think it is worth the spot. 4 Spinnerack, 4 Ariados. Just a reminder on the Spinnerack, that Stun Poison, if you go first, can be pretty darn good, or if you're in a tough spot and you have to go for that 50-50, Paralyzed and Poisoned for just a Grass Energy is going to be a very strong option for you. Ariados we've covered pretty in-depth at this point. The advice that I give is always look for options on the bench to spider trap active. What's really going to disrupt your opponent? What's going to put them in a tough spot? Do they have what's likelihood they'd have an out to it? And that's really the decision factor to make with the deck. Do you want to try to spider trap something on the bench, or is it better just to spider trap the active, hope for the sleep flip, and get that guaranteed poison damage off? This varies very heavily by the matchup and the situation, but I would say knowing what and when to spider trap is probably one of the hardest things about the deck. Now, 1 Apom, this is in my list. This is different from John's. But in any deck that I'm playing a high hole-on mentor count, I do like to play that one copy of Apalm. I just think it's so good to add a free draw on a mentor, especially in the mid to late game where I probably don't need the full 3 basics. And then if all I have in my hand is a mentor, then at least I can get a draw out of it. And then I play 2 copies of Holon's Magneton. Just really nice to balance the energy. I'm not sure. John played 1. I'm playing 2. It makes things a little bit easier with the energy lineup, but I'm not necessarily convinced that 2 Magneton is correct. But so far, it's playing pretty well for me in conserving energy. 4 Transceiver, 3 Mentor. Getting that good opening, not only the Spinarak and multiple EVs in play is going to be essential. So we do want to play that 3rd copy of Holon Mentor in the deck. 1 Adventurer, 1 Scientist, and then 1 Holon Farmer. Now, in my testing, the 1 Holon Farmer has been fine, but this is something that I do deviate from John on. What John did in his deck is he played a very high count of Giant Stump. He didn't play the full flame. He just played 3 copies of Giant Stump and then 2 Holon Farmers. And one of the main things that he was trying to do was essentially get in situations in the game where he can Giant Stump and discard his own Flarionds and then put them back in the deck with Holon Farmer. In my testing, I found the Holon Farmer to be good enough to play, but trying to play a heavier line of them, like 2 copies, and having that be a main strategy of the deck, I found just to be too slow. Because it's very hard. You can't Holon Farmer and Elms for a Flareon in the exact same turn. I will note the higher Giant Stump count that John played was most likely due to the meta in 2007. It hit a lot of decks in the format like Argon and Meta Knight very heavily, so it was a very good play in general. Outside of just discarding the Flareons, for Elms, we've got to get our evolutions. There is nothing scarier with the deck than getting a turn to Ariados and using Spider Trap to disrupt our opponent while they're trying to set up with Holon's Cast Form. It's also great in the mid and late game to make sure we have access to our evolutions, or even just an Ariados if we need it. For Super Scoop Up, we rely so heavily on those evolutions. We want to be able to pick those up. And I'll also say in my testing that Ariados can usually take a hit against a lot of decks. So sometimes it's just nice prize conservation there as well. John played 3 Mary's Request in the deck. I did switch this up a little bit. I think Copycat is too good not to play in this format. Players will pretty routinely have very large hand sizes. And then Steven's Advice too. This one's a little bit iffier because I do find that players are a little hesitant to bench poor cards against us because they don't want us to drag them active with Ariados. But I have found the Steven's worth playing. 1 Scott, just make sure we were able to search out our stadiums here. And then I went 2 Windstorm, 2 Full Flame, and then 1 Giant Stump. I do think depending on meta, you can make some arguments here to play a higher Windstorm count. Do like John did, play a higher Giant Stump count. I just like that Full Flame and the chance to get a little bit more poke damage in there as well. Energy is going to be 4 multi, works well with both Evolutions and the Ariados. 7 Grass, and then a single copy of Fire Energy. Now, this deck, I'm going to say it has a very low skill floor. It feels really easy to play, but to make the really good, tough plays with the deck and to play it at a very high level does take a lot of practice and experience. But it's an incredibly fun deck to play, and I really do recommend the people that are looking to switch things up a little bit in 2007 give this deck a try. I also think it's worth noting for history's sake that Florida, which both John and Steven were from, was routinely known in 2007 for having absolutely outstanding Flaridos lists. And when I went through and I really tested this, there really wasn't much that I found that I could... I always hate to use the term improve on past lists because I'm coming in with 15 years of hindsight to go over a list. But when I went over the list, John's list, there's his list was outstanding. There was very little that I felt that I could do to really bring the deck to a next level, and he really did have probably a top-notch Flaridos deck in 2007. But that's going to go ahead, wrap up the deck profile. If you guys haven't already, please like and subscribe to the channel. It's been absolutely awesome to see how much the channel's grown over the last year. And of course, I hope to see you in the next video.